Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Well, today I have my friend Brad Miller with me, and it's one of those just love Brad. And we had a little exchange back and forth, and he shared some information about what was going on with him and thought, you know what? It's time that Brad and I talk again, only this time instead of just shooting the shit, let's actually record a podcast, right? Because I think Brad is a pretty cool guy. And he's been doing some interesting stuff that I think, again, anybody who's listening to this can learn from. So the fact that you're sitting here listening to this right now, or driving in your car listening to this, wherever you are, the fact that you're listening to this means that there's something in today's episode that you need to hear, and probably something that you could share with other people as well. So with that, let's roll that episode with Brad. You are jamming with Jason Mefford, where you hear inspiring interviews with some amazing people. Some are famous, some may seem ordinary, and they are all doing extraordinary things to positively change the world. Sometimes it's just you and me having an intimate and authentic conversation about how you can change the world around you and rewrite the story of your life by being more authentic, accepting and loving yourself more, and spreading love to others. Since really, all you need is love. And what the world needs now is love, sweet love. We discuss all aspects of self-improvement, growth, and so much more. Great content, insightful advice that's practical and helpful to anyone that listens. You're always eager to come back for more and share with your friends and family, since you learn something in every episode. So sit back and enjoy the easy listening while you feel seen and heard in this informative, authentic, and entertaining podcast. Now, let's roll that beautiful podcast footage. All right, Brad. It's good. For people that are watching the video, they can see you smirking, but it's like, the whole time. Anyway, it's just making me laugh. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I know it's going to be a great episode because we're starting off laughing before we even get into anything, right?
That's right.
So we just take a little breath, and then we just start getting into it right now. For people that are listening, they're probably going to be thinking, okay, now why on earth do we want to listen to a podcast by a guy who was trained as a CPA and another guy who was trained as an attorney? This is going to be a lot of fun, right? Because you're an attorney by trade, I think, right?
That's right.
And but you don't necessarily fit the normal attorney mold, at least in my estimation, at least how we've met and some of the stuff that we've talked about as well. And so I was hoping that we could kind of get into some of that, because I know, again, as I've watched you, my kids are grown and gone already, so I've already screwed them up. Now it's their responsibility. But you have a daughter. How old is your daughter now? She
is 7 years old.
7. That's a
Yep.
great age. Okay. And what's her name?
Evelyn.
So I have to tell you, folks, Brad sent me a picture of his daughter, Evelyn, and it just melted my heart. Okay. And we're going to get in, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, of what the picture probably was. But, a lot of respect for guys like Brad, who are being good dads out there and raising kids. And so I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about that. But before we can really get into that, it's almost nice to have a little origin story. So here we go. Here we go, Brad. I know you got the little nod back, right? But let's just talk a little bit about, how you grew up, why you became an attorney, and kind of the journey that's gotten you to kind of where you are today. Because I know, at least for the last few years, and I'm not sure exactly when it happened, things started changing in your life, right? And you started becoming a different person. And so kind of share where it started and how the change started for you.
Well, to my origin story, there was a spider, and oh wait, that's a different origin story. Um,
Some little amoebas from the sea, and
Curled up, and
yeah,
some
which
gamma
origin story?
radiation. It was just a whole crazy ordeal, really. And somehow I made it out relatively unscathed, and my superpowers of flight and everything else like that really didn't develop, so I can't really help with that.
Like the
But
greatest American hero, or when
pretty
that?
much,
Yeah, okay.
pretty much, yeah. Um, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, I grew up in a rural farming community. Um, my dad was a factory worker, mom was a teacher, and it was a relatively kind of religious, I would say, area. Um, and kind of grew up that way. Um, Looking back, I kind of looking back at that time, I realized I really didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't really fit in. And at the time, I suppose I didn't really understand why that was, and honestly, probably didn't really care a lot of the times. Outside of playing maybe baseball with the neighbors or things like that. Honestly, a lot of growing up was spent by myself. And again, kind of looking back, I suppose maybe it makes a little more sense, maybe why that was, why I didn't quite fit in with everybody else. But grew up, um, in that household, and somewhere probably early high school, after having watched all those fun law shows on television. I think the one particularly was The Practice with Dylan McDermott at the time. Thought, you know what, I kind of like that judge guy in there, and I think I want to do that. I think that I want to be that person that sits up there and commands the courtroom and helps profess justice and all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of got in my head that, you know what, I want to be a judge. That's what I want to do. And obviously, to be a judge, you've got to go to law school. You be a lawyer first. So that kind of set my path of where I wanted to be. And again, going into high school, early high school, that was kind of my plan. I remember senior year of high school, they have you take like personality assessments and things like that to try to help you decide what you might want to do and all that kind of stuff. And my assessment said things like you should be a teacher or a social worker. It said, basically the opposite end of where it said an attorney would be. And I remember saying to myself, you know what? I don't care what that says. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a judge anyway. That's what I'm going to do. And so that kind of started off my journey, I suppose, into the law. I wouldn't say I was necessarily that there's anything about the law in particular that kind of really got me out. I just kind of liked what I saw on the television, honestly. And so I kind of figured I wanted to do that. I want to be in that world, I guess. And I don't like getting my hands dirty. So medical school and that kind of stuff was kind of out, like blood and all that kind of stuff. I'm completely out of that. So
I hear you on that one. Yeah, I didn't want to be like, doing autopsies on cadavers or anything else, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And while again looking back, I was probably very good at math at the time. I had in my head that I wasn't. And so that also kept me from going the route of like a CPA like you, because I was told myself that I'm not very good at math. There are not people I'm not as smart as some of the people, despite the fact that I was in the honors type of classes and all that kind of stuff on math, calculus and that kind of stuff like that, and did well in them. I still kind of had that voice inside my head saying, you know what, math is just probably not your thing. You're better off sticking to histories and science, other things like that. So that kind of, I guess, led or kind of took me up to go into to college, and went to college kind of as a pre-law major, which really means absolutely nothing. which just means I kind of ultimately want to be a lawyer, but still have to figure something out. And eventually decided, I kind of like this history stuff that I was studying. I really enjoyed that in high school, and enjoyed, American history and military stuff, and enjoyed talking about, Romans and Greeks, all that kind of thing. So history is the way I went.
Yeah, it's funny how I almost became an attorney myself, right? So I think probably, so some of the same stuff. You watch some of those TV shows, and it's like, oh man, I'd like to be that, right? I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney, because I just thought those guys were the badasses, right? And for a while there, then, because I when I was in high school, I did some work for the Idaho legislature, and thought I wanted to go into politics. And so again, law degree is a great way of kind of getting into politics, right? And so I was going to, started off as a poli-sci major, and then I had to run in with the police. And this is one of the things in my life, right, that changed the trajectory for me. Was I get pulled over for a bullshit traffic thing, and before I know it, there's like 3 cops there, hands on their guns, for like it was a expired license on a company vehicle I was driving. Anyway, so they played good cop, bad cop with me. But I remember sitting there, and it was like they kept asking me these questions that I couldn't answer, right? Because they were, how this is done, right? You can ask questions in such a way that neither yes nor no is the right answer. Neither one of them, doesn't matter how you respond, it makes you look bad.
Yeah.
And at that point, after I sat through that, I went, holy shit, I don't want to be the guy who every day of my life is asking people questions like that they can't answer. And so that was one of the points in my life where I switched, and I'm like, okay, forget it. I don't want to do that anymore. So I went accounting route instead. But it's funny how little things like that come along, right? So you did the same thing. You were watching the TV shows, and you're thinking, this is what I want to do. Pre-law is really nothing, so you got to have some kind of undergrad stuff. So you get history because you like history. I like history too, right? So it's interesting. Again, it's like how much of our own life we can see in other people's lives as well, right?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. So you go to law school. The point is, you still wanted to kind of become a judge, it sounds like, right? So kind of, how did your life change, I guess, maybe, when you first went to college? Because I know for me it was the same thing. I was, you're in Ohio now, so I'm guessing you raised somewhere in the Midwest as well, right? And
yeah, stay in Ohio.
Stayed in Ohio. Okay. So, and my family was, even though I grew up in Idaho, my grandparents migrated from Nebraska, Kansas. So I always said, our family was, Midwestern religious value kind of family, right? So we kind of grew up probably in a similar thing, right? You don't lie, you don't steal, you go to church every Sunday, all the different things like that, right? So once you kind of left the house and you started going to college, did things change for you, or were you still kind of the same person for a while, or?
I definitely lost some of the naivety that I had, kind of growing up in kind of rural area. Like, we lived probably 2 or 3 miles outside of town. And it was literally a town of less than 5,000 people. So, while we didn't live on a farm, like across the road, there are fields, there's cornfields, and, up and down the road, there's cornfields, and you pass cow farms and pig farms and things like that going. A lot of my family on my dad's side are farmers. They were pig farmers and things. So that's definitely that's kind of the world of around there. And so you don't, and this was also kind of pre or just start. I remember I remember um, getting all the AOL CDs in the mail when I was in high school. So that kind of telling what time was. But so this is really kind of the pre or very early internet age where, you didn't know what was going on like that. If it wasn't in the newspaper or on the daily news, it didn't exist. Right. So, a lot of things I learned about the world or about growing up or whatever, I had to learn by being there in college, which was a totally different environment than what I grew up with and what I was used to. Um, and so that was definitely a step up. That was definitely a growth for me. Was at that point going from small town kid to going into a large metropolitan city. I went to school in Columbus, and so
Okay.
I went to house
One of the
went to
largest universities in the country, like
right,
100,000
yeah,
students or something.
yeah, something, like 40,000 or something students in there, and there was about as many people in my dorm as there was like in my school, and so it definitely, that was a growing experience um for me.
Well, and it's interesting because, like you said, you guys lived 2 to 3 miles outside of a small town, 5,000 people. It was the same thing, even though I grew up in the Boise, Idaho area. We were actually about 5 miles outside of a small 2,000 person town that was about 10 miles outside of Boise, right? So,
Mhm.
kind of growing up, it was the same sort of a thing too. Because I know, you were talking before about that you spent a lot of time alone, didn't necessarily have a lot of friends kind of growing up. I was kind of that same way. I don't know if part of it was geographic wise, right? Because it's like my next closest friend was a mile away, right? I had to get on my bike and ride,
Mhm.
and there were only like 3 kids that lived within 2 or 3 miles of me, right? So it was like my friends were limited, and
Mhm.
so yeah, we kind of grew up a lot more isolated. So it must have been quite a shock, kind of like you said, getting to Columbus and now all of a sudden being with 40,000 kids from all over the state, but from all over the world, literally too,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. People, different cultures and things like that. And I mean, really, where I grew up is a very homogenous looking place, and so going to a major city where now you've got people of different ethnicities and different religious backgrounds and all kinds of, like, totally different world for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and so, I guess at that point, as you start getting exposed to some different things like that, I mean, what things were going through your head, at that point?
Um, I think some of it was still me still kind of being that loner, I guess, that kind of, and so um some of it was the difficulty, I guess, of adjusting to going from basically being by myself. I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger than me, but because of that difference in age, I was starting high school and she was still in elementary. I've graduated, before she got into high school, so there's enough distance in there that we didn't really. I wouldn't necessarily that we were close. We didn't really hang out and play and do that kind of stuff together. So really, it was just kind of me doing things, and then when all of a sudden I'm put into a dorm where I've got a roommate and now I've got, six, 5, 6 other guys living in a suite with me. It was definitely an adjustment of how do I interact with people? How do I be friends or, roommates, or just be able to interact on a day-to-day basis with other people my age, which is something that I really didn't have a lot of experience, for the most part, doing throughout growing up all the way to high school even. Um,
Yeah, so I guess what were some of the things that you learned by getting thrown into that kind of situation?
um, I learned to be more conscious of what was going on, about other people, about differences, about how other people might take actions, for instance. The way that I may perceive something or that I intended something when, it's just kind of me hanging out. It doesn't really, whatever I think, that's fine. But now I've got other people that I'm with, and they have um different worlds. I mean, they've got different thoughts, and they've got backgrounds and everything else that they're coming at, and so they see something differently. They have a different perception of what something means, maybe. For like, I wouldn't think anything of, sitting, something, with a you know, with a girl sitting in a room watching television or something like that, thinking it was very innocent, whatever. But a bystander may come in and say, "Oh, well, that seems dangerous that you're alone with this person," and those the kind of stuff that I never had to think about. Like, that was never really part of my world until getting thrust into this in college, and so that was a really big change for me, is having to kind of start thinking about that, about other people and where they're coming from, their backgrounds, and how they may perceive things. And I guess maybe being a little bit more intentional, although that was probably not something I was really cognizant of at that time, about really being intentional with stuff. But I mean, that maybe was kind of a start of a little bit of that, even way back then.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, I mean, growing up, I mean, just being by yourself, just with your parents, pretty much everything's kind of same old, and now all of a sudden you're thrown in. There's all these other people that, to what to you was normal, or the only thing that you knew kind of growing up, now all of a sudden is different, right? Like, my first, I didn't stay in a dormitory. I stayed in an apartment. Right. So we didn't have the cafeteria that we could go to. So we had to wash our dishes. We had to cook for ourselves. And it was the same kind of thing where it's like, I mean, we had, six of us in this apartment, and it was the same thing. We all grew up in completely different, houses. And so what we were cooking, or the hygiene or lack of hygiene,
especially
right?
For guys, yeah, the guys,
that certain people had, and it was kind of like, what kind of house did you grow up in, right? It was totally different than my mother's, right? I had to get my chores done by this time, and all these different things, and it's sometimes can be quite shocking, right, when we start to realize that there are people different than us, right? And I think this is one you'll probably laugh at this too, right? Is did you know there's more than one way to wipe your butt with toilet paper? You probably
like
didn't
direction
realize.
wise, or like,
Yeah, so there
oh, like the fold versus like wadded type of thing, or
well, there's
like,
fold versus wadded, front to back or back to front, right? Those are some different ways. But the one that I already kind of knew that, right? And I was taught to fold. I didn't know what my mother did in the bathroom, but my father was a folder, so I'm a folder, right?
sure, yeah.
But standing versus sitting. And because we were having a family dinner a little while ago, and this is my second marriage, and so it was funny because my wife and her kids and their girlfriends were with us, and her ex-husband was with us, and we were I don't know how that came up around the table. And it's like, well, do you stand to wipe, or do you wipe while you're sitting? Right. And so what was funny is everybody around the table did it one way except for me and one of the girlfriends. And it was like, I just had no idea, right? That, why would you stand up to wipe? You're already sitting, and you're anyway, but right. So when we start to become aware of some of these different things, right? And again, a lot of that, it didn't surprise me when my wife and her ex-husband both stood, right? If they both stand to wipe, then it would make sense that their two boys would stand to wipe, because that's what they were modeled, right? Just like I was modeled to fold, right? The toilet paper. But yeah, so when we come out of that kind of closeting, if you will, of what we think the world is only like this, because that's the only way we've been taught and the only experience we've had in the world, right? That now all of a sudden things change as we come out. So anyway, had to throw in that little story. I just still find it fascinating, right?
Yeah, well, that's a Tuesday afternoon for you, I guess.
That's just how I roll, right? Okay. Anyway, so all right, so right, so you start having these other experiences in at university, right? And then you end up going on to law school, obviously, eventually. But I'm guessing, when along the time here too did you meet your wife? Because I know that's usually again kind of a pivotal time for most people in their lives as well.
So we met in law school. Well, I was in law school, I guess. She was not. She was out in the working world. But I actually met online. One of the first people that we knew that had met online. Most people at that point, it was still kind of the internet, the young internet days. And so there was still kind of that whole, oh, is that really safe meeting people that somebody online? And, we still get that, we'd tell people, when they asked us how we'd met, we'd say, oh, we met on, and actually at the time it was Yahoo Personals. Again, dating myself there. Yeah, but when we tell people, yeah, we met online, we'd always get these kind of strange looks like, really? And like, like really kind of crazy people, but yeah, it worked. But it was actually my first year of law school, right around spring break time that we met and had a very awkward first date at a Subway that was right next to the law school, where we spent a lot of the time talking about the wallpaper. It had like the Subway print and everything on it, of like New York City subway or whatever like that. And so we talked a lot about that because we were both kind of nervous and awkward with it, and both walked away thinking, that was a train wreck. We're never going to see that person again. That was just terrible. And then lo and behold, we're now, gracious, 16, 18 years later now, still together, still kicking, still putting up with each other, I guess.
Well, and this is what's so nice, right? Is, I mean, there's always someone for everyone and everyone for someone, right? At least. And I think it's I was an awkward kid too, right? I was the last one to be picked on, when you were picking football, right? I was like the kid that was last left, right? And I was good, right? But for some reason I was always like that kid that was left out. I was the kid with the big ears and had glasses early and I don't know, whatever, right? And I know, I mean, you talked about that when you were younger, of kind of, being alone, maybe feeling a little awkward. Your first date was kind of that way too. And so maybe let's talk about that a little bit too, because I think sometimes, those of us that don't feel like we fit in don't realize how many of us out there feel like we don't fit in, right? Like the majority of people don't feel like they fit in. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, because I heard you say, too, when we were talking about that, it's like, well, I kind of know why, that probably happened, but, sort of thing too. So let's go there for a little bit.
So I think that, and I've lost my train of thought on you.
That's all right. It comes back very quickly, right?
Or just Amtrak's off the side and goes up in flames, and
we'll
have to come with something. But yeah, you have to try. Yeah, ask me again. I have to.
Well, so I know, you said when you were younger that you felt like you didn't fit in. So maybe what are some of the reasons why you felt like you didn't fit in?
So for me, I think a big part, some of it was the geography. I think you kind of mentioned. There were some other kids sort of my age that lived on my road. We kind of had a our road had quite a few houses on it, and there were some other kids on it. So I did have some friends that way. But again, still that distance from town. So predominantly most of the kids lived in town. And so they would all get to play with each other, hang out, as we grew up, we got to know each other. And so I had that distance away from them, kind of keeping me from really getting to know them. And they kind of small town grew up together and kind of formed their own little groups. And it really kind of got hard to kind of get into some of those as I got older. But another reason was that predominantly in the area where I grew up, probably 95% of my town was raised Roman Catholic, and I was not. I was raised up as Lutheran, as Protestant, and so there was also a little bit of that. I think that there was a little, they all had that thing in common. They all went to mass every Saturday or whatnot, and they had things they were all together and doing. And I was kind of the oddball out, and they kind of had a little bit of a way that they would grow up that was different than me, and so there was always those little differences, and just kind of finding you kind of get as your small town, just kind of forming little groups. It's really kind of hard to get in, the longer they go. And so just never really found a way to get into those. And again, looking back, I don't know if I ever probably really wanted to get into some of those necessarily. I was never really, in the jocks or the football guys or whatever like that. In high school, I got to, fit with the band nerds. We kind of all stick together, but, beyond that, and I also just enjoyed being myself. I didn't necessarily feel that I needed to be around other people, or that I needed to have someone else around all the time to keep myself occupied or to have a good time. I could do that by myself in a book. A lot of times.
But I think that's interesting that you say that, because I've always kind of been that way too. I'm actually an extreme introvert, but I play an extrovert on podcasts and wherever else, right? But I do enjoy being by myself, right? So as an introvert, you don't need other people to help recharge your battery. You recharge your own battery, right? Where some people, it's like, oh, for them to get recharged, they got to go to a party or they got to do something with other people, right? And what's interesting is, again, hopefully I'm getting wiser as I'm getting older, but, so many people actually wish that they could be comfortable being by themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many people, especially when they start moving to more, mindful practices or other things like that, they can't slow down their mind. They can't handle being alone or being separated from people, for a while, because they just have never learned how to do that, right? So that hasn't been an issue that you've really had to learn. You've always kind of been comfortable in that situation. It's more like learning, how do I fit in socially at work, or a lot of the other things like that is kind of where you're going, right? Like we all have kind of different paths that we have to go.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, and I think that was a lot of high school. Toward the end of high school, I remember, dressing what I thought other people would like, or that would be, kind of fitting a certain kind of a picture or kind of a thing that I thought would help me fit in. And I think the same thing happened in undergrad and college, the same way as like, what do I need to do to fit in? What I need to do to have, some girl like me, or, to be people want to be friends or whatnot. And even, in my legal practice, it was, what do I need to do to feel like for other people to accept me as a lawyer or as a good lawyer, and trying to think, what does that look like? What do I need to look like? What do I need to wear? I need to wear the tie and the suit and then whole 9 yards. I need to speak a certain way and use these big, crazy words that people don't understand what they mean. And, all that kind of stuff. And like you said, it's all, I think, trying to fit in ultimately. And like, hopefully with age, as you mentioned, kind of as we get older, kind of realize, at least I have, that it's not really worth it. Like, it's better to be myself. And I'd much rather be comfortable sitting here, in a hoodie and in a hat, doing this, as opposed to, or as in a t-shirt, as opposed to sitting there, exactly, as opposed to, all suiting up and everything else. And
Well, and it's funny because I'll, again, part of this is, self-embarrassment, right? To kind of share,
course.
but it's funny because, what do I need to do to fit in? I mean, how many times in my life have I said that to myself as well, right? And it was, sometimes some silly things because, for me especially, I mean, we had some financial troubles in our family. Late 70s was a bad time for the building industry. My dad was a builder, so we didn't have the money that other people had, right? And so, when there were things like, everybody started wearing Levi 501s, right? I wanted to wear Levi's like everybody else. My dad got Levi's for work, but I had to wear the Rustlers and the Wranglers.
Wranglers,
right?
yep. Mm-hmm.
And Wranglers was a step down, but Rustlers was even another step down. And I was wearing both of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, the point in time when, because there's stores like Ross and some of the other discount places, right, where you can effectively get name brand clothing, but it's like a year out of date, or there's something that's a little bit different with them. And so I remember, I'd earned enough money and I bought my first pair of Levi's. They weren't 501s, they were Snap, and they had an orange tab on the back instead of the red. So here I was, right? I was so proud that I'd saved up. I bought my first pair of Levi's and I wear them to school. And what do you think the kids said? Those aren't 501s. They've got a yellow thing on the back or an orange thing on the pocket instead of the red. Those aren't the real things, right? So you'd think I would learn, right? Same thing, members only jackets. Everybody had the members only jackets and they were so cool. I finally saved up because my parents wouldn't pay for, buy me one. So, and you know how in a lot of times in stores, they've got like those funky kind of lights.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not really sure. So I was looking at this members only jacket, looked like it was gray to me, right? And I'm not colorblind, but with the lighting and everything else, it looked like it was gray. So I'm like, wonderful, right? Gray is the color I wanted. I buy it. I take it outside. I put it on. No, it's got like a lime gray green hint to it, right? So it was like the same thing. Here I was trying to fit in and I was almost fitting in, but I still wasn't really fully fitting in, right? And again, I wish that I had learned my lesson when I was 13 or whatever I was at that point, but no, I've had to keep doing the same kind of stuff, right? Just like you're talking about. Do I have to wear a suit and tie, put on a monkey suit? And do I have to use big words in order to fit in? And it seems like at some point we just kind of say, fuck it, it's too much, right? And we just finally stop. So how was it, I guess, kind of in your life, when did you kind of decide it was time to quit trying to be like everybody else and just be yourself?
So even out of law school, like coming out of law school, again, you kind of have that brand new baby lawyer, don't know what you're doing. Felt like I had to look the part, look like a lawyer. So it was wearing the suits, we're dressing up and things like that. And that kind of kept going. Again, I've been practicing 15 years now. So it's probably went on for a good 10 or 11 years at least, where I still had this idea in my head that this is what a lawyer looks like. This is how a lawyer dresses. This is how a lawyer acts. This is how a lawyer talks. And I don't know what specifically, like, I can't say that there was one event specifically that's then changed me, that like this happened and, the lights came and the thunder struck me and I was all like, oh, well, that's stupid. Right. Yeah. Like, I don't have one of those type of moments for it. I think it was just kind of a gradual realization that, I didn't enjoy getting dressed up like that. Like, I didn't like to have to go in there and wear a tie, especially on days where I wasn't meeting with a client or wasn't going into court. Like, I'm sitting at my desk doing something. Why do I need to be all dressed up for this? Like, I'm not comfortable in it. I'd much rather wear, a sweater, let's say, as opposed to a dress shirt, or a nice pair of more of a casual pant as opposed to part of a suit or something. Like, why do I have to get all fancied up for that? And eventually, I started working from home, and so that really probably pushed that further now, because now I didn't have anybody to impress. Like, it was me at home working. I'd get up, I'd walk down the hallway to my office, and I'd start working. Maybe I'd put pants on, maybe not, depending on the day, how I felt.
How cold it was, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If the thermostat, the heater was up, maybe I didn't need any that day. But I think that's probably really pushed it, where I started to be like, I can just kind of wear whatever because nobody sees me. And then ultimately, I guess just kind of realized that, hey, the show, what's expected, or what I have in my head is what is professional, what is a lawyer like. I don't know where that even came from. Like, that's something that I've seen on TV. Probably goes back to the television show that made me want to be a lawyer. That's what they look like. But I realized that's not what a lawyer is. That's not what professional is. It has somebody that has to look like that. Somebody that has to use the big words. Somebody that has to be or act or come across as a certain way. Like, that's not what makes a person a lawyer. I don't need to do that to feel or to be a lawyer. And so I guess my identity maybe started to change around that I could be whoever I wanted to be. And I could, if I want to be a lawyer, you know what? I'm a lawyer because that's what I want to be. Or, if I want to be a coach, or if I want to be whatever, it doesn't matter what I wear or how I act or whatever like that. That's all irrelevant. That's all BS. It's who I want to be. Like I said, unfortunately, there was no lightning. I can't point to anything, but something just kind of gradually has come to me over the years, over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe.
Well, no, and I think it's, you don't have to apologize for it, because most of us, there isn't some lightning strike kind of, experience. Things just happen, or we change slowly over time, right? Because of little experiences that we probably don't even really recognize. But, especially, I mean, I can totally understand this, right? Coming out of law school, you get hired by a firm. There's usually expectations, right, that the firm places on you about how you're supposed to dress and what you're supposed to do. It was the same thing for me, right? When I graduated from college and I went to work for Arthur Andersen, which is one of the big firms in the country at the time. And I remember, obviously we had expectations, right? Like, it was white shirt Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, you could wear a blue shirt. And then Friday, it was kind of casual dress. You didn't have to wear a tie.
You have to wear a shirt that day? Was that the...
Yeah, we still had to wear a shirt, but we could wear a polo shirt, I want to say, or I don't know. Anyway, it was casual Friday, or maybe it started off as it was Monday to Thursday was white shirt, and then we could start wearing a blue shirt, and then eventually it eased up and we could go to blue shirt on Thursday. Anyway, something like that. But it was all just the indoctrination in what those expectations were. Now, was there really any reason for it per se, other than it just being something that you're indoctrinated in? Not really. Right. But even, you went back a little further. One of my professors when I was in college, he worked at Anderson back in the 50s and early 60s. And back then you had to wear a fedora hat, suit, and you had to carry a leather briefcase. That was just required. And it was also required, like, if you were a partner in the firm and you were outside in your lawn doing work, you still had to be wearing like khakis and a button down. So we'd have partners that would be like mowing their lawn on Saturday afternoon in like business, what we would consider now business casual or nice business casual kind of wear, just in case a client drove by and saw the partner, heaven forbid that he was sweating. But I remember my professor telling me the first day he showed up for work, right? He showed up, he had his suit and his hat on like he was supposed to. And he comes in and the manager's like, Frank, where's your briefcase? He's like, I don't have a briefcase. Like, Frank, you got to have a briefcase. I don't have anything to carry in a briefcase. Doesn't matter, Frank. Before we get to the client, we're going to the store and you're buying yourself a briefcase. So he walked into the client's office carrying a briefcase, an empty briefcase that he just bought because that was the expectation, right? And it's like, how stupid is this, right? I mean, how many of these things are we continuing to carry over and live in our lives like that, right? Which, you know, is a big deal to me, and it is to you too, right? It's like, you know, when do we stop all this silliness and just put it aside and realize that it doesn't really matter? I think you're still a professional attorney, even if you wear a t-shirt.
I'm glad that you feel
you
that
either
way.
know what you're talking about or you don't, right? I'm pretty sure you got a law license somewhere, right? So
haven't taken away yet. So
yeah, haven't taken it away yet. But it's interesting. Like, and like you said, I think your experience is what most of us have, right? Is that we just it takes us a while to kind of get to wherever it is that we're going to kind of go to. But anyway, so I wanted to, because I know I can just sit here and talk forever, but you got to get back to work. I got to get back to work too, right? But I wanted to kind of circle back, you know, because I know when you said, you know, your first date was a little awkward with your wife. How did that change, right? Because I think you said you both kind of walked away feeling like, okay, that was kind of weird, right? Yeah. But it obviously wasn't, because things have worked out and you guys have a beautiful daughter as a result of it. So kind of what happened, because I know sometimes we'll have experiences like that and then we'll go home and beat ourselves up and think, oh, I'm, you know, whatever, right? But what happened? Because I want to know. Something happened. Brad put on the charm. Or maybe she did. I don't know.
Yeah. You're closer, I think, than you realize. So I told you it was around spring break. I think it was like right before spring break when we had this subway date. And I was actually, so towards the end of during undergrad, during college was kind of when instant messenger was a big thing. AOL instant messenger. So we'd always be chatting and things like that on there and talking to people, whatever like that, and finding stuff. And then as got to the end of law school, or at the end of college and the beginning of law school, then you started getting these online dating things kind of be a thing, whatever, kind of the next stage of evolution or whatever. And so I would, just like I met my to-be wife on there, I would go and I would chat up with other girls on there, online, stuff like that. And actually had discussed with one of them to come visit during spring break. Our spring breaks aligned with each other. And so she was in pharmacy school and was actually going to take time, and she's going to come and we're going to meet and hang out for the week or whatever like that. And she actually ended up the week before she was supposed to come, she ended up breaking her arm. I don't remember what she was dancing or something like that, I think, and she broke her arm. And so wasn't her arm or leg or something, I don't remember. So wasn't able to drive and come out and visit. And so my whole plans kind of for the whole spring break were now gone. I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? Like, you know, kind of hang out with her. I don't know what's going on. And so ended up, and I don't remember how it was, because again, this has been almost 20 years ago now. Reached back out to my wife following that first date and found out that she was actually sort of kind of casually dating some other guy at the time. And I decided at that point, and I don't know why I decided at the time, but I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to win her over. You know, we had an awkward first date. I wouldn't necessarily say that there was a lot of attraction or that, like, you know, we like were soulmates or anything like that at the time. But all of a sudden I just got a little competitive streak, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to win her over from this other guy. I don't know who he is. I don't think about him, but you know what? Screw him. I'm going to win. and I did. And so I
I love it. It's like mild mannered, nice Brad, and all of a sudden he's like, "I'm going to kick this guy's ass. I'm going to take her away from."
yeah. And so a couple dates and hanging out, and she spent a couple nights over, and he was out of the picture at that point now, and it was me. And I've not been able to get rid of her since. So,
Well, and it's funny because, at the time you didn't know why you do it. I think now you probably know why you did, though, right? And what actually was going on there.
Even now, some of it was me just saying, screw it. Like, I'm tired of the neediness. I'm tired of feeling like it's out of my control, out of my hands. And so I'm just going to do something completely different, something totally kind of out there in left field for me, something that I wouldn't normally do. And I did it with, ironically enough, without attachment. I didn't really I was like, you know what? It doesn't work out, big deal. But you know what? Heck, I'm going to try. I'm going to win her over. And I just had it in my head that I was going to do it. And so now looking back, I can see that was probably the first time that I really manifested something. And in this case, it ended up being my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, because that's a huge manifesting thing, right? Because again, I mean, it's, you're a good student, you'll get into college, a good student, you'll get into law school. Those kind of things. Yes, it takes some things to do, but as you were sitting there talking about it, like you said, that getting tired of things being out of your hands, right? And so what you didn't realize, was you set an intention
yep,
without attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually stepped into the power of Brad, right?
Yep.
Instead of letting things happen to you, you created what you wanted to have happen.
That's exactly right.
And it's a huge difference in how you feel too, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean, I could actually tell as you were talking right there,
mm-hmm.
and you were telling that story, your energy even changed as we were talking.
Yep.
As you
I felt
were
a little warmer and more animated.
And it was almost as if you were like, right,
mm-hmm.
you got 2 inches taller, right? As it kind of goes too. And it's, that's where it's amazing anytime that we set intentions, that we go after something without attachment, and we step into our power. It's amazing the things that we can actually manifest or create.
Yep.
So, I know it kind of threw out the little trailer at the beginning about your daughter, Evelyn, because it was, I think she's just a cutie anyway. I've seen some pictures.
She gets it honest, so
she gets it. Yeah. But it's as opposed to your, and again, I mean, we both grew up religious. I would not consider myself religious now. I'm spiritual, if you want to use the word, or whatever, intuitive. And I know you've kind of, moved that way as well. And some of the things that, like I said, I've seen some pictures of what you guys are doing on Facebook, and some of the things maybe before of you stepping into more of who you are and what you like to do, and just doing what you like to do instead of trying to do what everybody else wants to do, right? Is apparent to me, right? It's one of the things that I admire about you, as well, is that you're who you are, right? And I think it's interesting, right? So as an example, right, is most families, because we were joking about this before we hit record, right? It's like, you got a 7-year-old girl and you're going on vacation, right? Mm-hmm. So where do most families take their 7-year-old kid on vacation, right? A theme park, Disney World, something like that, right? Where'd you guys go?
We went to the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina. Now, what is special about Asheville, North Carolina for people that don't know? The people that know are going to go, "Oh man, I get it, right?" But the people that don't know about Asheville, North Carolina, what's special about that place?
Well, so I don't know how crazy we want to go. We don't have that much time to get into it deep in it.
We're just gonna dip
We're just gonna
people's toes in it, and then they can
dip them.
come
I
back
don't
and
want to
learn
lose
more
all your
later.
audience. I don't know how,
I don't
although at this point, if they're your audience, I'm sure they're fully immersed. So I'm sure nothing at this point. But so we'll just say there are places on the planet that tend to have more energy than others, power places, power spots, or whatever on the planet. And in the United States in particular, there are 2 or 3 of them. One of them is Sedona, Arizona, which most people have heard of or whatever, talk about the vortexes and things like that out there. And another one is Asheville, North Carolina. And so that was one of the draws for me, particularly to head out there to visit, was to be able to take in that energy and be part of that for a nice week.
Yeah, well, and it was, because I saw the video, because I know it all started off because I love music, and we talked about that stuff. I got the guitar, and there's a couple of drums back there, and I just bought myself a Native American flute too. So I'm going to do a
Nice
Facebook Live on that here in a little bit. But so I like music, right? I love music, right? And so Brad sends me this little video of his daughter playing the drums, right? And it's this big group of people, but you can see that there's an older man that's there with her, kind of showing her how to play the drums, right? And it was a drumming circle that was there, right? So maybe just explain to people kind of what a drumming circle is, because I know there's one, they do them in different places, but I know Asheville, it's like regular on the clock, like once a week there, or a couple times a week they do this in one of the parks down there. But what is it, and kind of?
So every Friday evening, just people come together, like I said, in a downtown park in Asheville, and they just play their drums together. They're all hand drums, so you're not talking about like the drum set,
40-piece drum set, rock
right?
drum
You're
set.
not drum sets. You're not talking, like marching band stuff. None of that kind of a thing. Timpanis, nothing, but hand drums. And so you've got, and there must have been at one point probably 40 people, maybe more, just all sitting around, and there's kind of tiered. It's kind of like almost like a little natural amphitheater kind of stuff with like tiered seating. And so there'll be people kind of sitting in the tiers and just playing drums all together. And there's no set music. There's no, basically everybody just comes down and just starts playing. Somebody kind of gets started, and everybody just kind of falls in line and plays, and everybody kind of do their thing, and kind of whatever comes to them. And this is something they do, like you said, every week, every Friday. They have this drum circle in Asheville. And my daughter loves music. She's taken piano lessons. She loves just to sing. She loves to dance. She might be a cheerleader, but that's another ball entirely. But she just loves doing that kind of stuff. And so I was like, hey, to my wife, I bet she will really enjoy doing that. She really enjoyed doing this drum circle. So she got out and played drums, or even just listen. Like, we didn't even intend for anything outside of just sitting there and listening to the drums. Got to be part of that, and she could dance to them or whatever. And figured, what, she'll probably like that. So we set up our dates when we're doing things during the week, so that on that Friday we would be in downtown Asheville doing things. And the plan was to do all the stuff. We do shopping and all that, and then eat dinner, and then go to the drum circle. And we didn't tell her we were going to do this. So this was kind of a surprise for her. Kind of the end of the vacation, we're going to go do this. And we got there, and she immediately pulls out a book and starts reading. The drum starts to play.
Like, we're doing this for you, girl, and you're reading.
Yeah, she like their drum, everybody's going, and she's there sitting there with a face in a book. And the gentleman that you saw in the video with her, I think he's one of the kind of organizers or something like that. He's a former educator, I think. He's a ranger, a forest ranger down there as well. And so he like saw her reading the book and kind of pointed her out, and got my wife to get her up there and took her up to the drums. And she just went to town, and she was playing until her arms got too tired and sore, and she had to stop. Otherwise she would have kept on playing if she could have, but she just got tired of it. But she had a great time, and that was one of the highlights of her trip. Not she liked the gem mining, probably number one, but
Well, who doesn't like mining for gems? I mean, come on, right? Yeah.
yeah, that
Did
was
you guys
that
find
was her
anything good
favorite.
too? Did you,
We got some geo. We got a nice big piece like this. She found little amethysts and little quartz and a lot of rose quartz and different things like that. So um a lot of things. She really likes gems and rocks and crystals and things like that. So
well, and it's fun that, again, she, because that's the thing too. And again, my hat's off to all the parents that are out there trying to do good with kids now. Again, where it's like, you guys didn't force her to do it. I mean, if she wanted to just sit there and read the book, that's okay. She's still participating and listening to the music, but the fact that she actually got involved and loved it so much. And I mean, you could see on her face too, right? I mean, she was just loving what was going on. And he was sitting there teaching her, how to do it and kind of the drum patterns and stuff like that, and for her to go, that's an experience, right? Not only was it fun, but it actually touched her at a deeper level that she probably didn't even realize too, because anytime that you have, sessions like that where people are coming together and making music together, there's no set agenda, there's no set, music. It's just everybody coming and being themselves and playing what's coming from their soul. And the beautiful thing is when everybody does that, it makes beautiful music. I mean, you just sit back and listen to that. And it's like, because I love drumming music, obviously, right? I mean, I've got different kinds of drums, but it's beautiful, beautiful. And now she, has that experience and can, continue to tap into that even after you get back too. But I, the picture that I made reference to at the beginning, because I know you have a meditative, and mindful practices that you do as well. And it was just seeing your daughter sitting there in nature in a meditative pose and the bliss that was on her face just melted me, right? Like, as adults, we're sitting there and, we're usually trying to do these things and we're like, oh, how long has it been? It's been 2 minutes. Oh, geez. Okay. I keep going. I made 5 minutes. Okay. But to sit there and see her in just that state of bliss, to me was beautiful. And like, you're doing a good job, Daddy, keep it up, sort of thing. And for all the parents that are out there doing that, you just do the best you can. But the memories are the things that your kids are going to remember, and making those memories with them is just wonderful.
yeah, memories, experiences, they're so much more valuable than stuff.
Well, your kids are going to throw whatever the stuff is that you buy them.
And it'll break and everything
It'll
else
break
and get outdated and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, and I know too, from just in my family, as we sitting around talking, it's never the things that people got that they talk about or that they reminisce about from childhood. It's usually the experiences or the stories. It's the times when you're laughing, the things that at the time are not so funny, like when my son locked all of us out of the car in the middle of the night in the middle of Nebraska, and I had to run 3 miles to find somebody to try to call the sheriff to get us back in the car. So not funny when it happened, right? But funny now as you look back on it. And it's those kind of experiences too that people end up remembering. So, well, Brad, this has been great. Anything else that you want to share as we wrap up here that you don't think that we covered today that people need to hear? Or?
I mean, like you said, it's it's a practice. It's kind of I don't even know the words to describe it. It's a shift. It's just been a change in how I approach things from, the kid really who wanted to be a lawyer because he saw the judges on TV, and got thrown into a scary, a new situation in undergrad where he didn't know how to act with others and how to socialize, and and didn't really understand and appreciate the differences between people. I mean, I just kind of assumed everyone was kind of like me at that point. I mean, I didn't know any better. I didn't know anyone had different thoughts of it. And, and the idea kind of looking back now of that it's not really that necessary to fit in, that it's all about, the expectations that you might have, and that they're really worthless. They're all in your head. Like, we put so much pressure on ourselves to meet these expectations that we have for ourselves. And I even wrote a post about it today on LinkedIn about how, all of it's in our heads. Like, nobody else really cares. It's not that somebody else is putting these things on us, but it's all something that we've got in our head. And so, I mean, these are things that I've been learning. These are lessons that I've been working through here over the last, good part of my life here, and particularly more recently, and something I'm trying to pass on to her, to my daughter. Kind of the importance of appreciating others for their differences, for not feeling you need to fit in. Like, one of the things we talk about with her, she talks about about being weird, and we kind of explain, weird just means different, and different is good. Like, being different from other people, being weird is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not something we use to put down people or say negative things about. So it's just trying to kind of teach her those things, those lessons that I've been taking on, and trying to help her, give her a leg up, I should say, on where I was, so that she can start down that road from a young age, focusing on that stuff and on kindness. Like, she's one of the kindest souls that I've ever met. Like, her first, she had actually a kind of a show and tell thing today in school. And one of the things she wanted to take was a little stone that has a unicorn on it. And she talked, and, I asked her, well, why you want to take that? What are you going to tell them about the reason for bringing this in today? And she's like, well, because my favorite animal is unicorn, and because it represents helping others, and I mean, that's really, like, she's always concerned about people. She plays soccer and doesn't want to hurt anybody else. So she's always very timid around it because she doesn't want to kick anybody to hurt them. Like, and somebody falls, she immediately rushes over. Like, she's all about that. And so, like, it's just trying to help her that. And then the lessons I learned from her are, yeah.
Well, because that's the amazing thing, is we end up learning more from our kids.
Oh yeah. Our kids are our greatest teachers.
Yeah. But it's, and again, it's that, I love what you said there, that, because so many of us have grown up our whole life thinking that we're weird and thinking that being weird is bad. So we've spent most of our life trying to not be what we think is weird and try to fit in with everybody else. But the thing that's really amazing about people is their weirdness, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that the people actually love the most about others is their weirdness. It's what's different in them, what makes you different from somebody else. And I mean, I grew up with Mr. Rogers, that too, right? I mean, he's my man, right? And it neighbor was always telling us that we're special just because of who we are. We don't have to be anybody different. We just have to be us, because, that's what makes this world a beautiful place. And the sooner that we all come to terms with that we all understand that we all start helping other people realize that, and embrace other people's differences, and just love them and be kind. This world is a beautiful place. And that's, like I said, Brad, that's one of the things I love about you, because I know you've got that kind heart too. And love what you're doing in all aspects of your life as well. And I just like you as a friend. So it's been fun
appreciate that,
jamming with you for a little while too. So I appreciate it. And we'll have to, I know that was kind of a backstory. We might have to do another one that gets into some other areas, or talk a little bit more about music because I was a band turned too as well. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks, Brad. I really appreciate it, and keep up all the good work that you're doing.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. The fact that you listened to this entire episode means you got value and others will too. Do me a favor and leave a 5-star review with comments and then share with others. You can also check out all of my videos on my YouTube channel and my website, jasonmefford.com. This podcast is primarily for education and commentary and does not represent professional advice. Views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.